Hi, I'm attorney Scott Poisson. I've been helping injured people get the money compensation that they deserve for over 25 years. I'm licensed in Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, and Florida. What is my car accident case worth? I'm asked this question just about every day. And the short answer, it's complicated. So let's dive into it. First, you need three things in order to have a successful car accident claim. Number one, liability. Liability means fault. You have to be able to prove that some other person, company, or other entity was negligent. The legal definition of negligence is the failure to use reasonable care under the circumstances. For example, someone is texting and rear-ends you. Someone fails to yield the right-of-way, or runs a red light. Number two, causation of damages. You have to be able to link up an injury that occurred from an accident. Number three, insurance coverage or a deep pocket. The at-fault person or company needs to have insurance or sufficient assets to pay for your damages and injuries. Without all three, liability, causation of damages, and a monetary source to pay your damages, your case cannot be successful. For example, let's say that a driver runs a red light and causes a bad accident, but there is no injury. Then the case would be worthless because there is liability, but there are no damages. Or assume there is liability and there are damages, but the at-fault driver has no insurance. Well, then you would not be able to successfully recover something from someone that does not have the ability to pay for the damages that he or she caused. Similarly, someone could suffer a very serious injury such as brain damage or paralysis. However, assume that there is no way to prove that it was someone else's fault. Again, you would have a problem, even if there is a serious injury, if you cannot prove that someone else was at fault. Let's go into liability and causation of damages in more detail. The value of your case is determined by the strengths and weaknesses of the evidence regarding liability and causation of damages. First, we will discuss liability. As you already know, liability is fault. The stronger the evidence that the at-fault driver was at fault, the better the liability is. For example, if there is video evidence that shows the other driver ran a red light, liability will be very strong. Similarly, if there are credible, independent witnesses that can testify that the other driver ran a red light or failed to yield the right-of-way, that again would make liability very strong. Another example, generally speaking, a rear-end collision is very strong liability. However, now let's assume that there is no video or independent witness. Two people each claim that they had a green light, or two people each claim the right-of-way at an intersection with a four-way stop, and there is no definitive way to prove fault. Now liability becomes a he said, she said situation. It is less strong than if the accident was captured on video or if there were independent witnesses or some other form of evidence to prove fault. Liability would not be a guarantee, and the value of the case would have to take into account that liability was not a 100% given. Moving to causation of damages, which is often where the real disagreement is with an insurance company regarding the value of a case. There are some injuries that are obvious. A person breaks his leg or arm in an accident and is immediately transported to the hospital. Clearly the fracture was from the accident. Or someone is in a head-on collision, hits their head against the dashboard or airbag and suffers a concussion or brain injury. Again, it is obvious and easy to link the injury to the accident. However, oftentimes injuries are less obvious and can be debated by the insurance company. For example, assume a 50-year-old is rear-ended and suffers whiplash and neck pain. The injured person and his or her lawyer and doctors will argue the neck injury is from the accident, but the insurance company has the right to get all of the person's medical records and finds records showing that the person had complained of neck pain in the past, or that the person's MRI shows chronic degenerative changes. The insurance company will argue that some or all of the person's claimed problems pre-existed the accident and were not caused by the accident. In this case, causation of damages may be weaker and will become the battle of the experts between the injured person's doctors and the insurance doctors. Insurance companies and lawyers determine a case value based upon the evidence and what juries have done in the past with similar fact patterns. Now that you have a better understanding of the key components that determine value, let's dive deeper into what are recoverable damages in a car accident. Damages are broken down into two main categories: economic damages and non-economic damages. Economic damages are tangible. That means a real number can be derived. For example, a person is in an accident that requires back surgery, and the person's medical bills total $250,000. Medical bills are an economic damage. Taking it further, let's say that the person's doctor states that the person will require $75,000 in the future for additional care over the course of the person's lifetime. That means the economic damages for past medical bills is $250,000, and the economic damages for future medicals is $75,000. In the same example, assume the person was out of work for 3 months, and it can be proven that the person was employed earning $1,000 a week. Then the person's past wage loss would be $12,000. Let's say that a person will suffer a future loss of earning capacity as a result of an injury. This means that the person will earn less money in the future as a result of an injury. And let's say that it's $75,000. That would be an additional element of damages of $75,000 for future loss of earning capacity. So in this example, the person's claimed economic damages would be past medicals of $250,000, future medicals of $75,000, past wage losses of $12,000, and future loss of earning capacity of $75,000. That would mean the person is claiming a total of $412,000 in economic losses. Now, the insurance company will typically not agree. The insurance company may argue the back surgery was not caused by the accident, or the insurance company may argue that the charge of $250,000 for the surgery is unreasonable and argue that it should have cost a lesser amount, for example, $100,000. Similarly, the insurance company may argue that the person could have returned to work sooner, and so the wage loss should be less than what the claimant is asking for. Remember, the insurance company will always hire its own doctors and experts to try to lessen damages. Moving to non-economic damages. This is often the real Wild West when determining value. Non-economic damages are intangible. This is what people usually call pain and suffering. They are not based upon a medical bill or a missed paycheck. They are arbitrary. One person can assign a value to someone's pain and suffering that is completely different from someone else. Let's use the actor Tracy Morgan's accident case as an example. In 2014, he was rear-ended by a truck. He suffered a broken leg, nose, ribs, and was in a coma after which he then complained of headaches and memory loss. One person could listen to his injuries and the impact on his life and believe that the value of his pain and suffering is $10 million. Another person could listen to the same facts and believe the pain and suffering is worth $100,000 or $500,000 or $2 million. There's a lot of gray area when talking about non-economic pain and suffering damages. A lot of this comes down to the person. Is the person really likable? Is the person a convicted felon? Can the person really show how the injuries have impacted his or her life? In general, the better the person comes across, the more likable, the more that a person can explain the impact on his or her life, the higher the value of pain and suffering. A back injury for a person with a desk job could have an entirely different value than a back injury for a construction worker. Similarly, a back injury for an avid triathlete who has a proven love for running, biking, and exercise may have a completely different value to a person who has always led a sedentary life. So now that you have a better understanding of the elements of damages, how is the value of a case determined? Lawyers and insurance companies take everything into account. So if liability is weak, then the overall value will be decreased to take into account the weaker liability. If credible arguments can be made that all the claimed injuries were not caused by the accident, then the overall case value will be decreased to take into account the issues regarding damages. Let's assume that a truck slams into the rear of a car with 5 people in it. There's clear liability, meaning that there is not an issue regarding who caused the accident. Let's also assume that all 5 people in the car injured their backs, and that the evidence is clear that the back injury was from the accident. Person A does not require any medical treatment. Person A goes home with a little pain but gets better within a few days. Person B goes to the emergency room from the accident scene, but does not require any further treatment. Person C goes to the emergency room and then needs 2 months of chiropractic or physical therapy. Person D goes to the emergency room, then gets a few months of conservative treatment, but does not get better, and then goes to a pain management doctor and gets 1 epidural injection. Person E does everything that D does, but is still in pain and ultimately requires a major back surgery. How much do you think A's case is worth? If you said 0, then you would be correct. No treatment essentially means no injury, no damages. Whose case is worth the most? Of course, person E. Generally speaking, and it is common sense, the more hurt a person is, the more treatment that is required, and the more serious the treatment, the more the case is worth. Ultimately, lawyers and insurance companies mix everything into the proverbial pot. There are so many factors that determine a case value. Some factors increase worth, some factors decrease worth. Lawyers and insurance companies use historical data from jury verdicts with similar fact patterns to come up with a range of what a jury would likely do with a case. When both sides can agree on a settlement range, then a case will likely settle without a lawsuit. However, when the two sides arrive at very different ranges, that is when it becomes necessary to litigate and allow a jury to determine the value. When that happens, the decision is taken from the two sides and placed in the hands of a jury. If you found this content helpful, please click subscribe below. Let me know if you have any questions in the comments section. And please click like and share this video with your friends and family.